Okay. Hello everyone. This is a Velero community meeting on October 26th. First, let me do some status update. For 1.9.3, the RC date had been decided on October 28th, and the included fixes can be viewed in this link. And if there's at the plan and it will be GA next week. For way 1.10, we have met the FC criteria, so now we are preparing RC, and because we have delayed the FC for several days, so the RC may also be delayed. And but let's see it, and the date is not decided yet. And for the last 2 weeks for Copia integration, we have done the performance test, and also we have done the upgrade and compatibility test. So the both, we will prepare documents for the both. And for the individual update, myself is working on several things. The first thing is it's about a new design about the Velero upgrade command. It is used to replace the current Velero upgrade processes that has been documented, and that is a manual way. And the Velero upgrade command will replace that in future. But since because of effort, we will not include this design and the implementation in Win 1.10. But it's still a good idea and a good solution. So please continue to review it, and we may be able to implement it in 1.11. Okay. The next thing is some document refactor, because we have refactored the port volume backup workflows, and we also added 2 passes, and also we renamed something. So the document need to be refactored, and I have submitted a PR. Please review it. And finally, I troubleshooted some pipeline issues. So right now, the pipeline is basically working for all the cases. Yeah, that's from my side. And Jiangxin, please.
Okay. I'm working on the developing Velero 1.9.2 Spurs cable package and integrate it into the TCE and TKG. By far, the TCE part is completed. I'm still working on the TKG part. And the second one is I cherry pick some PRs into the 1.9.3 release and do some tests. And the last one is adding some new cases for 1.10. And that's all.
Okay, thanks, Jin. And Juin.
I've done the Velero upgrade test and write some batch script and document. Second, I'm releasing 193 and planning GA next week. Yeah, that's from me.
Yeah, I think also the performance test, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And Danfeng.
Hello. Yes. I'm running a nightly test for 1.10. And we still have a few stability issue, which caused we haven't have a full test passed for one time, but we still feel confident to FC because all tests has been passed by several test round. And I will try to fix the stability issue in recent days. And we prepared the test plan for 1.10, and we will hold a roundtable test in tomorrow. Tomorrow we will have a all the member will have the test for 1 day. Okay, that's all from me.
Okay, thanks, Stanford. And Scott, please.
Yeah, so there are some updates on the async action design. There was some feedback early this week. I responded to the questions and I made some corrections and some minor updates to the design, pushed those. Among other things, one thing I'd forgotten to do that Daniel reminded me in some comments was that the state diagram from Dave and his original design that we copied over still had those old previous names for the states. And since we changed the names of the uploading states for the more generic functionality here, I needed to update that diagram. So that has been done. And I made a few more updates, corrected some mistakes, updated design in a couple of areas in response to feedback, and then answered some other questions as well. Hopefully, now that there's more attention on this again, we can kind of go back and forth and kind of finalize this in the next week or so. Obviously, there's not going to be any code in 110 based on this, but the hope is that by the time we've branched for 110 on the release branch, this is approved, so we can start putting some PRs out there on main against main. I actually do have a draft PR already, again, for the backup item action API of V2. But again, I don't have any intention on getting that reviewed or merged until we've got all the designs out of the way, because I realize that any changes to the design at this point might require changes to that refactoring. I just wanted to get started on some of the early things, because I think the API designs are where there was less discussion. Again, there were actually, one of the comments from Daniel did involve possible field names. So even that could change as needed if we do make changes to the design. But because there's a bunch of components to this, I wanted to kind of front load some of the early implementation work around the API changes to get those basically going soon after we've made the 110 release branch. That way, a lot of the stuff can be in place early in the 111 development cycle.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Scott, and thanks a lot for monitoring the comments. Keeping monitoring, and yeah, I think we will focus on discussing this PR in the next couple of days. Yeah, because
Oh, sorry, yeah. I do want to mention one thing. I know one of the comments was about the concerns about the JSON file because of changes around unified repo stuff, and I actually think there might have been some confusion about where that was coming from. The plugin itself is not going to be writing to the object store. This is more analogous to what we're doing, for example, in the backup or restore when we upload the logs. We create a gzip log file that we put to the object store. And this file that lists the operations that Velero needs to come back and look at would be uploaded in a similar place, kind of in a similar way. So this would just be another file that goes through the existing object store interface that we have for AWS and everything else right now. So that's not something the plugin is going to be doing directly.
Okay, okay, so that will be good. It's like just like the existing JSON persistent
exactly.
things, like like the log.
That's right.
So that will be centrally handled by at the end of the backup, for example, by the backup controller.
So the plugin just returns an operation ID, just a string. Velero takes that operation ID, puts it in a list as it goes through each item in the backup or the restore, and at the end, it collects that list and puts that in the object store, kind of like it does with everything else. So that's going through that existing object store interface. So that would if, for example, we have an object store in the future that uses NFS local storage, and we use an object store plugin to implement that, this will still work because we're just going through the plugins. the object store plugins, just like everything else in
Okay.
Velero.
Yeah. So actually things is very simple, right? Because the different plugins. First, it's a common interface. I mean the BIRA. It's a common interface. So different plugins may use different way. May face different storages. So we'd better not to not make any persistent thing inside the plugin.
Right, exactly. No,
So
all the plugin needs to do is it has an ID for this operation. So for example, a volume snapshotter plugin has a snapshot ID that we already have access to. We already know what it is. The plugin just returns it. The same with the data mover plugin, for example, creates a data mover CR that the data mover controller is going to operate on. So that CR is going to have some ID. This could be an object reference, for example, and that's just a string that the data mover plugin would pass back to Velero, and Velero treats it just as a string value, and then it creates this JSON file and uploads that through the object store interface, just like we do with the log files and the backup itself, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So the next question is something like since we don't write anything from the plugin, why should we define this this JSON and the way to write the JSON in this plugin interface CR design? Can we just mention that if the plugin wants to write something or persist something, it is plugin's own work?
Well, no, the plugin. So that's the thing is this isn't the plugin. This is Velero's interface because when Velero calls plugins, Velero has to come back and check to see if these operations are done. So Velero needs a list of all these. Basically it's a list of kind of plugin ID operation ID pairs, so that Velero can say, for example, you have two volume snapshots that the volume snapshotter plugin initiated upload on, and you've got two more operations from a data mover. So Velero has this list of 4 operations, and then at the end of running the backup, it grabs the list and says, okay, it calls into the volume snapshotter plugin with that snapshot ID and asks the plugin, hey, give me the progress for this. And the plugin figures out, okay, it's done or it's not done, and returns that value. And the same with data mover plugin or any other plugin. So this is just a list that's part of the Velero backup controller infrastructure. So the plugin doesn't create this JSON, doesn't even know that this file exists. This is something that, for example, the item backupper knows about, or the backup controller knows about. Because what happens is that when Velero finishes running a backup, if there's still these operations that haven't completed, because for example, the data mover is uploading a big snapshot to storage, then Velero puts that backup in the that async operation running, waiting for plugin operations state, moves on to the next backup, and then when we reconcile again, we go back and look at existing backups that are in that waiting, waiting for the async operations state. For each backup in turn, it grabs that JSON file, gets a list of objects of operations that we need to check status on, calls the plugins, and if everything's completed, then we move the backup into the completed state, and now it's done. So this is a file, and this is information that is only meaningful to the Velero backup and restore controller. It's not something the plugin even knows about. It's not part of the plugin interface.
Okay, so currently we mentioned this JSON in this PR just on behave just we I would say that is to talk about the behavior of the controller, right?
Right.
Not the plugin.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Because this design is not just the API for the plugins, it's also the design for the changes to the controller necessary to process the plugin changes, because all of these things have to work together. We modified the plugin interface to initiate this operation and return the ID and the methods to call progress and cancel. But the design also includes sections for what we're doing to the workflow of the actually running a backup or restore that requires changes to the list of backup and restore status phases and logic changes around the backup and the restore workflow. And that's where this item, the JSON file fits into. It fits into the section of the design around the workflow changes to backup and restore, not to the plugin changes, because those are two different components of this overall design, because we have to have all of these things working together for it to be functional. Now, they're going to be implemented as separate PRs. For example, the first thing we're going to do, which I've already started, I have one PR open on, it's a draft now, just because it's not an approved design yet, to change the plugin interfaces. Once the plugin interfaces have been modified to have those V2 interfaces, the next step is going to be adding those additional workflow states to the CRDs, so that those are valid states for backups and restores. And then the next thing we do is modify the actual backup and restore workflow to check the status and update it and go through that whole process. And that's going to be probably the most complicated part of this, because that's actually changing the workflow of the way Velero runs backups and restores. And then once all that's in place, the last thing to do for this is actually update the existing plugins that need this to make use of the new feature. So for example, the volume snapshotter plugin would then use this, or the once we have a data mover, those plugins would make use of it, or any other plugins that needed it. So that's kind of and that's all outlined at the end of the document. It's kind of the implementation tasks. It kind of calls out, there's the API specific changes, the workflow specific changes. And so there's different sections of the design document that focus on those different parts.
Okay, thanks. Then that's clear for me. So maybe we can find a way to clarify this on the document, because first time when I read, I believe that this is the JSON persistent things is done by the plugin itself, or done by Velero or the backup controller. And then when I read it again, I intend to believe that it's done by the plugin. So I got somehow confused.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go back and look at the document tomorrow to make sure if there's anything I can do to kind of, if it helps to move things around to make it clearer. But basically, there are separate sections of the document for plugin API changes, workflow changes. But I'll go back there tomorrow just to double check to make sure that all of the thing relating, everything relating to those the item operations JSON files are clearly in that workflow, backup and restore workflow section of the document, rather than plugin. Because that's I guess the key here is that that's part of Velero's processing of the backup and handling the API changes. And then the API changes themselves are more limited, because within the API, we're talking about a single item for a single plugin at a time. And at that level, the plugin changes are a little bit more isolated. Basically, the execute method of the plugin returns this extra operation ID, this optional. So if it's blank, if it's empty, then that means no change, that we don't have an operation to check on. And then we have this progress function that we're adding. That's a new API function where you pass that operation ID back in, and the plugin says, okay, I know how to look up the operation ID for the plugin. Let's check to see if it's done. And so maybe it's looking at the data mover CR, maybe it's looking at the snapshot upload, whatever the specific plugin is. The plugin has to know how to interpret that ID to find a status. Velero doesn't know that, doesn't understand that. That's kind of the split. But on the other hand, when you're talking about managing the list of operation IDs and plugins, that's Velero workflow job on the backup and the restore, and the plugins don't need to know about that, because that's core Velero.
Yeah, it's a good idea to clarify which part is done by the interface and which is done by
I'll check
plugin.
that. I thought that was already there, but it might not be clear enough. I will go back through the document tomorrow to make it clear if I need to. That's not a problem.
Okay, thanks a lot. And
sure.
in this in this days, we will focus on discussing about this PR. And we will let you know for any anything.
Yeah, and I will mention those 3 PRs below, the backup automation V2 API design. Those are kind of the more detailed design specific to the API change. So that kind of falls out of the big design. So there's the overall design, which is kind of, that includes the API changes built in. And then these are smaller, more detailed API design that actually lists for example, the proto code that we would be using for those API changes to actually build out those changes. So that's kind of what the split is. So once we approve and merge and make whatever changes we need to the async design, then I can go back, if there's any changes necessary, I can go back and modify those three kind of smaller but more detailed plugin API designs, and then we can get, those will probably be quicker to review and merge because they're more limited in their scope. It's just, okay, for backup item action, here's the changes we're making. And I will mention restore item action is a little more complicated because that combines two features. Because we have a previously approved design that's referenced there that also added a couple of functions to the API. And so we're basically putting both into the V2 because there's really no point in making a V2 and then an immediate V3 all in the same 1.11 time period. So we're just combining, the feature requirements of two different features into one API design because we're basically making a V2 for restore item action that adds functions for both. But the design itself links to the relevant documents that it's based on. But don't worry about those yet. Let's get the overall design, finalized first. Once that's merged, then we need to focus on getting those smaller API design PRs merged.
Yes. Thanks, Scott. And Xun, do you have any comments on this PR because you are also working on this?
You mean the item progress? PR?
Yeah.
No. But by far, I don't have more comments. I think Scott already clarified the JSON file and some details of the design.
Okay, then we can discuss more about this offline. Okay. Okay, thanks, Scott and Wenkai.
Yeah. Now I have bumped up some the versions of the Golang library used by Velero in the PR, and the PR had merged. And next, I'm going to verify, do some verification for the Azure plugin to check whether to the CSI plugin to check whether CSI plugin can cover the use case that the plugin can back up Azure disks from multiple resource groups. This use case is not supported by Azure plugin, but we'll see whether it can be supported by CSI plugin. Yeah, this is from my side.
Okay, thanks, Wenkai. And next we go to the discussion topics. The first one is from my side. Actually, one of the we found one problem, and we need to change the behavior of the existing behavior a little bit about how we support the S3 compatible object store, but not known by Velero. Currently, Velero knows the AWS, right? And besides that, Azure and GCP. But for some, there are many other cloud providers that providing the S3 compatible object stores. So at the existing REST backup actually support that. So the user need to let me open this issue. User need to provide something like a parameter called the REST repo prefix. What is the repo prefix? It is only understand by REST. It's in this format. So it's like when Velero calls do REST backup or call REST backup command for AWS, it's also composing a URL, something like this. So for others that Velero doesn't know, Velero requires user to provide this URL into the REST repo prefix. parameter, but that's only work for RASIC because this part is unknown, only known by RASIC. This is protocol decided by RASIC. So the first question is how do we support COPIA? Because COPIA only support that we provide the separate parameters in a common way, like this is the region, and this is included in the something we call it endpoint, right? Region, and this is the endpoint. This is a bucket name, and following that is a prefix. So COPIA only support to only accept this kind of parameter: endpoint, bucket, and the prefix. There's no way to provide a URL string to and give it to COPIA. That's the first problem. The second problem is actually we have a map in this place, the BSL stack.config. This is a map, and that map we already have these separate parameters. I mean the endpoint bucket name, and endpoint in Velero we call it S3 URL, and we already have it. So they are redundant information. So we can only make we only need to make one small change to make the second way work, and as a generic solution for both RASIC and COPIA. So in this PR, first thing I just make that second solution work by changing the code a little bit. Second, since users has already using this uses this RASIC repo prefix in a previous release, and theoretically we can remove it because the second part also work for both. The second solution work for both RASIC and COPIA, but for compatibility consideration, we'll leave it there. That is to say, the common way or the recommended way for Velero to handle this as very compatible and not known providers is to use the second way, that to specify the separate parameters in the config. But Velero also supports that for RASIC only to support to provide user to provide this URL in the RASIC repo prefix. That is what we have done in this PR, and so because of we have some behavior change in this PR, and we will also document the new solution or the new way in the pod volume backup document. So please help to review this PR, and we can discuss anything through the comment or something like that. Or do we have any comment right now for this change? If not now, we can continue to review this PR offline, and I believe that this PR need to be we need to have a solution to support COPIA before the RZ. So we may have 1 week, something like that. If this work, it's good. We can merge the PR. If this doesn't work, I think we will need to find another way. That is the current situation. That is from my side. And any questions on this PR? Okay. If not, the next one is the current performance testing result and the upgrade document for V1.10. That is will be introduced by Chuming, and I think that will take some time. So let's go to the third question, the discussion from Shubham first, because that is a question, right? So are we planning to remove RASIC support? If yes, then when? And the information from my side is like first of all, we will not remove RASIC in 1.10, and when will we remove it? That will based on first of all the new path, copier path, what the copier path works like and performs like. If the copier path is works very good and the RASIC and its performance is much better, we may consider to remove RASIC path in the near future. If not, we will keep the both. For example, for some cases, copier works, but for other cases, RASIC works better. So in that case, we will keep the both paths for quite long time until we finally decide that with one path, everything could be solved or everything is working well. That's the information from my side. And Shubham, do you have any comment on this?
Yeah, so we are definitely not gonna remove it for 111, right?
111, I don't think so. So yeah, so Johnny, do you have any comment on this? I think we will not remove.
Yes, regarding the, I think feature, this is a feature deprecation, right? I'm not sure if we already have a feature deprecation process in place for Velero project. If we don't, I think we firstly need to work out a process on that, right?
Yeah.
So
That process
maybe-
need to be discussed in the community and all the maintenance agreement on that. Based on that, we can start to deprecate any features in next step.
And I would say too, since we're definitely not deprecating this in 110. I mean, generally, when you deprecate something, you know, there's, and this is where the policy comes in. We haven't decided, but you have some period after you deprecate it before you remove it, because you know when you deprecate, that's where you don't remove it. You know, you warn people this is going to be removed in the future, but it's still there now. So you have to have some. So once you decide to deprecate it, you know, at a minimum, there's that one release, and we might decide it's two releases. That's why we need a policy around this. We need to decide, you know, for example, if we deprecate something in 112, does that mean we're going to remove it in 113, or could it be 114? You know, again,
right.
Like in Kubernetes, usually when something is deprecated, it's usually several releases later that it gets removed. Now, a smaller project like Velero may not need to have that level of stability, but at the same time, we probably want more than one release.
Scott, yeah, I would agree, more than one release, but I wonder if the release schedule for Velero is consistent enough for us to like be just release based. We might need to include some amount of time in that equation as well.
Oh, in other words, like you said, a minimum of X number of releases in X amount of time. So whichever happens later.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I think let's get it started to work out that process for Project Velero. I think that is the first step we need to do, right? So if anyone could to submit a PR to propose the process, that would be good. And also I will to think up with our PM about this, if he have any opinion on this or anything we can, to proposal for the deprecation process. And once that is PR is ready, I think the maintainer and could to discuss this in the community and get an agreement on what process we prefer to use to deprecate feature. So does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
But my only question relating to that is because you said, you know, we should have someone should submit a PR to you know, propose policy here is where exactly would that policy go? Is there an existing document somewhere in the docs where it would be appropriate, or would this be a new document that would go somewhere? I'm not sure what exactly the PR would be modifying, I guess.
I think it is, you mean the process will be posted on where, right? I mean that proposal maybe it should be in the same repo, right? If that is get ready, so everyone can
Right. So
know.
it may just be that we need a new file, under the docs section of the repo that would just be a deprecation policy.
Yeah, I think let's figure out. I mean, let's figure out where we should put this process.
Like right
Okay.
now, yeah, or later.
Later,
I'm sorry.
later, I think. Later.
Okay.
I don't think we can get a result
Yeah.
right now, right?
There was just a long pause.
Yes, right.
Yes. So anyway, we will be careful for the deprecation things, and we will have the standard processes, and we will also check the status of the other parts. I mean the copy parts.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
And I'm just thinking from a timeline point of view, I just, since we're very close to 110 being released, and since we don't have a policy in place for deprecation yet, I'm assuming that means that 110, we're not deprecating anything. So the earliest we would deprecate Restic that it could be would be in 111, which would then be some number of releases after that to remove it. But we also might decide that 111 is not the time to deprecate it, based on, whether we have issues that aren't, fully covered by copy or whatever yet.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's a separate question from the policy question. We have to reserve the policy one
Mm.
first, and then once we have a policy for deprecation, then we can decide the timing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree. Okay. Okay. Thanks all. And for this discussion. And next ones are from Quming. So time to you, Quming.
Okay. First, I want to talk about the Velero upgrade. Here, I take the one upgrading, for example, we mainly do two things. The first thing is to apply the CRDs. The second thing is to update the Velero and the Ristic image. But for
Yeah. Sorry, Quming. Yeah, that is current available upgrade steps. So it's quite simple, and that is manual steps that users need to take reference to these steps and do it manually, right? Okay.
yeah. And but for 110, we have done some things like we have changed some containers store arguments, and even we have renamed the Ristic daemon to node agent. So we can't just use this two-step to do the upgrade in 110. Here we mainly have two-step with the same. First, we should upgrade the CRDs. Second, we should update the images and change the start arguments in containers. Also, for the Ristic, we should delete all the Ristic port and create a new daemon that name is node agent. So that is just a bash script, and it's just for reference. And we will develop a new Velero command to do the upgrade. It is just a temporary bash shell for 110. Yeah. Any comments on it? If you have any comment, you can comment in this PR. Yeah, that is for the
Yeah, let me add one more thing to elaborate on this dock of this solution, the relation of this solution with the new Velero upgrade command. Actually, the Velero command will do, if we have the Velero upgrade command, it will do the things included here and include that in the code and do it automatically. But you know, for way 1.10, we cannot include that because of errors. So we have this this script and this doc to help user to manually do these steps. That is a relationship about this two solutions.
Yes.
Okay, Julie.
Next thing I want to share about the Velero 110 performance test. Here is the Velero 110 performance test, and we do the test in the environment of 1.21.14 Kubernetes version. And we use the many of the repo and NFS of the sharded file system. And the mini disk has the 300 megabytes per second write speed, and the NFS has the 175 megabytes per second write speed. Below, we have 9 test cases, and for every test case, we divide it into 2 groups. The first group, we use 1 core and 2 gigabytes memory. The second group, we use 4 core CPU and 4 gigabytes of memory. Yeah. For case 1, we created 4 million files, 2 million directories, and empty files. The obvious distance between Copia and the Ristic is the repo usage. The Ristic uses over 3 gigabytes repo, and the Copia just use 18 megabytes. For case 2, it has the same size of files with case 1, same size of directories with case 1, but we write 100 byte random content in per files. And the result also shows that Ristic still use double more disk than Copia. And from case 3, and in case 3, we do 4 round of tests, and the file size from 20,000 to 2 million. And each file we write 100 byte random content. And we use the Velero default resource configuration, that is 1 core and 1 gigabyte memory. Case 3.1 is 20,000 files. This one is 40,000 files, 70,000 files, and this one is 2 million files. And from this we see that for the tiny files, Copia use more CPU and more memory than Ristic, but less time consuming than Ristic and still less repo usage than Ristic. From case 4 to case 7, we did a test from total 10 gigabytes to 500 gigabytes content. And case 4, we have 1 megabytes per files. Case 5, 10 megabytes per file, and to case 7, we have 1 gigabyte per files. And And the result shows that both Copia and Ristic with one core CPU that they almost use up all the CPUs. This and Copia use the 94 and Ristic use the 100%. One core almost the same. For one core almost the same. But if we increasing the CPU cost, Ristic will directly triple the use the CPUs. For this case, Ristic use 100% CPUs, and we increasing to 4 cores, it directly into 320 and 12% of usage of CPU. But for Copia, the increasing is not so obvious. And we have analysis this phenomenon that we found that the influence of Copia is the speed of disk write. But for Ristic, if we give more CPU resources, the time consuming is much shorter than before. Here is 16 minutes. In 4 cores, it goes to just 5 minutes.
Yeah. So it means that it implies that, right? So for the throughput, we have some factors like the throughput Copia or Ristic can process, and the throughput of the disk. That may be the 2 primary factors. So in this case, it implies that under the 1 CPU, 2 GB memory, Copia has already reached the roof for the capability of the disk. So we can see that when we increase the CPU and the memory, there is not so much increase. But for Ristic, under the 1 CPU and 2 GB, it has not. The bottleneck is on itself. So when we increase the CPU and the memory, the fetching time is much shorter, and it has the fetching is much shorter, and it has consumed much more CPU. That means the processing of the Ristic requires more CPU on this kind of cases.
Yes. And for the Cas8 and the 9, the total data we want to backup is the same 900 gigabytes, but Cas8 we have 900 files, and each file with 1 gigabyte. And the Cas9 we only have 1 file, and the total file is 900 gigabytes. And the result, both the results are similar, but the phenomena that we mentioned previous is much more obvious, that we're increasing the CPUs. Copia directly tripled, and in 1 core CPU, Ristic just ran out of time, and with 4 CPU, it runs for 2 hours. And I also found a phenomenon that for every, this is the usage of memory usage of Copia and Ristic. For every test, I found that the Copia memory usage in the line is very stable, but the Ristic, with the time passed by, the memory usage is a linear growth. So overall, all the tests that shows that, including tiny files, our deep directories, our large files, Copia use Copia is much faster than RISC. And for tiny files or zero content, we think that RISC have some problem with the data store in repo, especially for this case. And for tiny files, Copia use more CPUs, but when increasing the file size, Copia use less CPU than RISC. Yes, that is the I am briefly go through the document, and you have any comment or supplement?
Yes. So for the overall, I mean for the conclusion here, yeah, just here. So we can say that besides one thing I want to add is like it doesn't mean that when we use Copia there is no OOM. Actually, both Copia and the RISC doesn't make any control on the CPU. Sorry, on the memory usage. So it's like on the memory usage. So it's like under the, we call it massive small files. For example, the first couple cases. So it's like no, sorry, it's like that. When we go to the large file size, when we have a large backup size, so the memory usage on both Copia and the RISC will be increased. So in this kind of case, user need to change the default Velero's resource configuration. I mean the resource limitation. Otherwise, there will still be OOM. And the thing I want to emphasize, this is the natural thing about the backup, or especially for the file system backup, because for the file system backup, first of all we need to consume CPU to traverse the file system, and also we need to store the file system metadata. And finally, on the repository side, we need the repository need to store the dedupe indexes, something like that. So many places that require memory and the CPU. So it doesn't mean that we will switch to Copia there was no OOM. Or I want to say that in some scenarios, the current default configuration, I mean the resource configuration of Velero is not enough. Users need to increase the resources, and we can read this overall conclusion, and it includes for which cases we need to change the configuration. Yeah.
Yeah. Any comments on this report?
Yeah, thanks, me. I think where this report will be, I mean, published in the GitHub.
But I don't know which place is suitable to put this doc. Are we just the link? Put a link list.
What about like this? We will create the performance test or performance guidance doc, right? And that will be in the our GitHub repository. I mean code repository. So we will include the important things that mentioned in this performance test and into that doc to guide the user to make decision on the path or make the configuration change. And so for others, because there are so many details, for others we will not publish that. Does that work?
I think it sounds good. I think it just want to have some information to let the community users to have a reference how to configure agile environment based on what we have tested, right? So I think it just give it some reference is good enough, is my opinion.
Yeah, that's what we do in the performance guide.
Yeah, that is the share from my side, Yonghui.
Okay. Thanks. I think we have done all the topics for today's meeting. So do we have any other things? Okay. We nearly run out of time. So if there are no other things, we can finish today's meeting. And thanks everyone. And have a good day and a good evening. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks folks. Bye.